Today we're going to be taking a look at the HeyGears RS Turbo, a very interesting resin printer from the guys over at HeyGears. Like most of our reviews, this unit has been sent to us, but HeyGears doesn't get any special treatment here as they have no say over what is said in this review. There are two variations of this printer, the RS and the RS Turbo. The main difference being the RS Turbo comes with an amber screen, which uses some advanced light filtering for some added benefits. And currently in September 2025, the RS version can be purchased as low as $6.99. When it comes to resin printing, the RS Turbo packs a punch and has some really decent specs, but mostly what people are going to be interested in is going to be its build volume. With a build volume of 222 by 122 by 228, we could definitely say that the RS Turbo has more than enough room to play around. We're not going to go through and list all the specs of the RS Turbo, but we will be talking about some of the features that we really like about this resin printer. For the review, HeyGears sent us over the RS Turbo itself, along with the wash station and the curing station, along with something a little bit extra with the heated resin tank. Which, if you haven't seen all of this laid out before, let me tell you, this isn't an FDM printer. It's not something you're just going to throw in the corner of your bedroom and just forget about it. You're going to need an entire workspace for the RS Turbo and everything that goes along with it. But if you're like me and you enjoy the process of resin printing, then realistically, this isn't going to bother you. Personally, I really enjoy my resin station and everything that we have set up over there. After a few trips back and forth with a dolly and some unboxing, getting everything set up was incredibly easy. All we had to do was download Blueprint Go from Android and Blueprint Studio for our computer. It's important to remember that even though the HeyGears RS Turbo is a closed ecosystem, it can still be used completely offline without account. But for our setup, we just went ahead and bound it to our account anyways. If you've ever set up a resin printer before, then you know that the process isn't always simple or straightforward. But this was probably one of the easiest setup processes that I've ever had, resin printer or FDM. One thing that really stands out about the RS and RS Turbos is these printers are some of the easiest printers to use when it comes to resin 3D printers. With one of the best features being there's no second guessing with the build plate or anything like that. The whole system is automatically leveling, so you don't need to mess around and try to mess things up. And if for some reason you do get into a spot where you're having a little bit of trouble or something's wrong with the printer, these printers have built-in error handling and tech support. Neither of which I've had the luxury of using, as the experience with the RS Turbo has been absolutely flawless. There's no complicated calibration, configuration, or setup files to print. It was just plug it in, bind it to the account, and then we just have to decide what we're going to actually print. Which is kind of funny because I find myself spending more time looking for files than I actually spent setting up the entire resin station. The first resin we're going to try out would be the PAP 10, which is HeyGears high precision resin. And to do that, I'm looking for something a little bit more special. Lately, one of my favorite games has been Clair Obscur Expedition 33. So I went ahead and found a file of one of the main characters, Luna, and threw it into the slicer to see what we could pull up. And this is where we see the first benefits of the closed ecosystem. One of the first things that you do when you open up your slicer is it asks you a series of questions. What printer are you using? What resin are you using? What quality are you wanting to print in? And then you just go from there. Unlike some of the other resin printers I've used, we're not using a few bottles for test prints and calibrations to get our best results. HeyGears knows exactly what's going on with the resin you've selected and the different options you picked when you first start slicing. So now all we have to do is kind of move things around, arrange it on our plate, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the auto supports. Once everything's arranged and our supports are set up, we'll just go ahead and hit slice and then sync this to the cloud so we can send it over to the RS Turbo. Now, before we hit print, we need to go ahead and put some of our resin into our printer, and that's where these really interesting looking bottles comes in. One of the things that I like about the RS Turbo is that the resin tank is self-filling. There are a few different designs on the market, and quite a few resin printers have this feature. But the RS Turbo is a little bit different thanks to its proprietary bottle. If we remove the cap on one of these bottles, you'll see that we have a little plunger type design here. And all we have to do is drop this into the back of the printer. The plunger is pressed up and the resin starts to flow into the vat. proving that sometimes a simple solution can help increase your feature set. Now that we have our resin into the printer, we just need to start our job, and it kind of becomes a little bit of a waiting game. And while we're waiting, this is a perfect time to talk about something really important. You see, there's a huge issue with resin printing. This is an enclosed studio, and there are no windows or doors or anything like that we can open up. And contrary to what you might have seen on video, it's not as big as you might really think. Because we're in an enclosed space, fumes are a massive issue, not only with the RS Turbo, but with any resin printer. We have both filtration and air exchange built into the studio specifically for projects like this. So you don't want to put one of these in an enclosed area without a lot of airflow. And you definitely don't want to put it in your bedroom where it's next to you while you're sleeping. So if you do plan on doing any form of resin printing, please keep air quality in mind, because the fumes from a resin printer can be really hazardous to your health in the long run. Because the way that this figure was laid out in the slicer, it was printed using 2 build plates. And because we were using the highest quality setting, 30 microns, this print overall took about 2 days with both plates included. Once everything was printed, we needed to make sure that this went into the washing and curing stations. Now, with this hardware, I originally wasn't super sold on the wash station because I wasn't really using it yet, but that all kind of changed when I first used it. The wash station makes use of 2 of these buckets with snap-on lids. They have a little plunger at the top, an air switch, and a little ball valve down towards the bottom. The concept is pretty straightforward. The idea is you just drop your bucket onto your wash station, and it kind of oscillates or rotates it back and forth, splashing the alcohol or your solvent around your model to get it clean. This is a wash station from a different manufacturer from another one of our resin printers. And the way it works is you drop your model into the wash, and then there's a motor that spins the alcohol or solvent around inside of the bucket. The problem here is any sort of support debris or any little pieces of resin that collect at the bottom here, you need to dump this entire thing out to clean it out. And it's always been kind of a pain to work with this wash station specifically. Initially, when they sent this, I didn't understand why they sent 2 of these buckets for the washing station. But once you understand, you understand. The idea is you can take 2 of these buckets and set one on top of the other. You open the air switch on both, and then once you place one on top of the other, it will depress this plunger right here. And then you simply just open up the ball valve, and it will drain the solvent or alcohol into the other bucket, leaving behind the model and any debris that's in the top bucket. And it may seem really simple and elementary, but something like this, as simple as it is an absolute game changer for anybody who has worked with resin. And I have to admit, with the wash station, I was extremely skeptical, but it's simple things like this where HeyGears really shows that they know what they're doing. But we're not quite done just yet. There's one more thing we need to do before we're done with our model here. For curing our resin, HeyGears has a larger unit that we'll throw our figure into and let it run. And one of the cool things about both the washing and curing station is the slicing software knows exactly what the process needs to be for both of those units, so there's no guesswork or anything like that. Anytime you sync your files to the cloud, you'll be able to send them to all 3 units, the resin printer, the washing, and the curing station. If you've ever worked with a resin printer before, you would know that there's always been the question, how long should I wash or how long should I cure my models? And because HeyGears has included this feature set, all that guesswork is taken out. So we just simply drop our part into our curing station and just hit start. But overall, my absolute favorite feature of the curing station has to be its ability to bake a 3D print. Even when curing your prints for the right amount of time, some resins have a tacky or unfinished feeling to them. And that's where the baking option for the HeyGears curing station comes in almost perfect. And outside of feeling tacky or unfinished, there's a few other things that can be going on with your prints. On something like this, just because the outside feels smooth and cured doesn't mean that the inside of the print is 100% solidified. Some people like to take their models or figures and put voids and different things in them so that they save on their resins. I am not one of those people. I like my figures or models to be completely solid all the way through. And again, this is where baking comes in incredibly helpful, as we can go ahead and turn on the baking option for the curing station and know that our model turns out the best that it can. This is definitely the quality you would expect from a higher end, more expensive figure, with a few caveats. Mostly the only issue that we're really seeing is a few areas where the supports left a little bit of texture towards the back of the model. Now, we could have negated these with a little bit more tweaking in the slicer to kind of help those supports out a little bit more. But we weren't looking to do that. We were just going to go ahead and use the auto supports and see what came out. Even with using the auto support feature, the quality that we're seeing here is honestly something that most people would be extremely happy with. And the absolute best part about this is at 30 microns, there are absolutely no visible layer lines or anything like that on this model. And the resolution of it is incredible. But here's a few close-ups so you can see the same thing that we're seeing with this model and kind of judge for yourself. Looking at this model, it's easy to tell that we have a high level of precision and accuracy, but it doesn't tell the whole story. Here in my hand are a few smaller chips, and from the onset, they don't look like anything special, but these might be the most telling thing when it comes to the precision and the accuracy of the RS Turbo. Generally, I have some really good vision, but these chips have some text on them that I find incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to read with just my eyes. But when we drop one of these chips in front of a camera lens and pull focus, you can see the level of precision and detail is insanely accurate. The fact that we're able to completely read this text that is almost impossible to see with the naked eye just goes to show exactly how accurate the RS Turbo actually is. For our review, HeyGears did send over a few of their different types of resins so we could try those out and see what we thought about them. Now, each one of these resins does something a little bit different. An interesting note about this resin is HeyGears has a interesting naming scheme when it comes to their materials. So you kind of need to pay attention to see exactly what's going on. But once you understand their naming scheme, it actually makes a little bit more sense. So here we have some PAH tin, some PAF tin, and some PAP tin, along with some PAS tin. Initially, that might sound a little bit confusing, but it's really simple. Just pay attention to the third letter. PAP tin is precision, PAF is flexible, and PAH is high temperature. So mainly you just want to pay attention to the third letter to tell you exactly what it is. But also, don't worry, you can just go ahead and read a little bit down on the bottle to understand a little bit more about the resin. This is where things get a little bit interesting. You see, when talking about HeyGears, you're obviously going to be talking about HeyGears resin because unlike other resin 3D printers, the HeyGears RS Turbo is a closed ecosystem. And being a closed ecosystem, that means that the RS Turbo and its software are designed to use HeyGears resin exclusively. Looking online, you'll find out that you can use other resins with the RS Turbo, but keep in mind it is not designed for it, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. The next thing I wanted to try out with the RS Turbo was the PAH 10 resin. This is a high temp resin that's also made for a little bit more strength than your normal PAP 10 or modeling resins. The bottle says that the PAH 10 has a deflection temperature up to 95 degrees Celsius, and it's made for more rigid applications. Long story short, the entire purpose of the PAH 10 is something more like an engineering grade resin. Part of the decor in the studio is these IKEA SCADIS boards that we have behind the main set and behind the resin set. So we went ahead and printed a simple shelf for our SCADIS board using the PAH 10. If you've ever worked with resin before, you would know that resins aren't generally known for being very durable, and quite often most resins have a tendency towards being very brittle, but that's not the case with this resin at all. The hooks or legs for any Scatus accessory are incredibly small, and it would be nothing that I would ever print in any normal type of resin, and it's not really something that really works extremely well even with an FDM filament-based printer. So it's kind of interesting to try out a Scatus shelf with this resin, and you can see right here, normally we would experience some sort of bending or breaking with a normal resin print, but we're not getting that at all. Applying enough force, you could break almost anything. But I'm finding that the PH10 is a lot stronger than I initially thought it would be. Went ahead and printed a few other things in this resin, most of which we painted for another video. But I think I'm going to be saving this bottle for some future projects where I think there might be some really cool engineering applications. Now we know that the PAP10 precision modeling resin looks great with our print here, but how does the PAS10 work out, or the standard resin? Are we actually losing anything when using their cheaper standard modeling resin? We went ahead and printed a few different things here using the standard modeling resin. A few sci-fi style spaceships, a little dinosaur here, and then the mandatory figure that everybody expects from a resin printer. This model was done by one of my favorite creators, Martin, over on Printables, and it's from the show Stargate Atlantis, and it shows the perfect use of the RS Turbo. This model is designed to be a much larger FDM print, but it's incredibly highly detailed, and I figured why not throw it in and see what we get out. And one thing that really sticks out is all the different little antennas and details in this model, and we can see that this comes out almost perfect from the RS Turbo. Now, the standard modeling resin is one of those resins that feels a little bit tacky even when it's cured for the right amount of time. But we go ahead and throw this into the curing station and then turn it on bake for about an hour or so, and it comes out feeling perfectly smooth, exactly how you'd want a resin print to feel. For our PAS10 or standard modeling resin, all of these prints were done using 50 microns because we were going more for volume over quality. And I expected to see a noticeable dip going from 30 microns to 50 microns in our quality, but honestly, we're not really experiencing any sort of dip in quality, and there are no visible layer lines when using the standard modeling resin. The only thing that we are seeing is a few areas where we're having some issues where the supports contacted the model. But again, this is because I'm using the auto support feature. And if I spent a little bit more time on our supports, then we could really get rid of those altogether. But if you are trying to go for volume and you don't want to spend the money on the PAP10 or precision resin, then you should have no problem using the standard modeling resin as opposed to the alternatives. Now let's go ahead and talk about the big issue that the community has with the HeyGears RS Turbo, and that would be its proprietary and closed ecosystem. A few of the major complaints that people have is this system uses proprietary resins, and you don't really have control over any third-party resins or any options for the RS Turbo. Keep in mind you can still use third-party resins, you just don't have control over any of the settings for it. If you've been here for a while, you might think that I'm against closed ecosystems, but strangely, I'm not. As long as the company is very upfront about what is possible with their hardware and their software. There are major benefits to closed ecosystems, and that's one thing that the RS Turbo excels at. You see, a lot of people out there don't really have the time to sit and tinker, nor do they have the interest in messing around with different settings or calibrations. And when it comes to the RS Turbo, all you need to do is tell it what resin you're using, put it in the vat, and then slice your file. A closed ecosystem helps guarantee a consumer experience across the board. And there are different levels to hobbyists and makers. Not everybody wants to tinker or play around or learn how to 3D print. Some people just want to be able to download a file, throw it into the slicer, and at the end of the day, know that this is the quality of 3D print they're going to achieve. For people who don't have the time or a real desire to mess around with 3D printing, I would definitely recommend the RS Turbo. especially for people who don't care about anything other than getting their prints. The problem with the word community is it leads people to believe that everybody shares the same ideals and beliefs, and unfortunately, a lot just don't. I don't have a problem with HeyGears and their business model because I understand the customers that they are targeting, and there is a really strong position in the market for people who are looking for this type of ecosystem. For the HeyGears RS Turbo, I really like its simplicity and easy use, tied together with excellent hardware design. It's very clear with the main resin printer and all the accessories that HeyGears really had an idea of what they wanted to achieve, and I think they've definitely been able to achieve that. This resin printer has some really cool stuff going on with it, and we could sit and talk about the specs and different advancements in technology with the RS Turbo all day long, but I think it's kind of counterintuitive based on its target audience. There's some really amazing things going on with the RS Turbo, but what's more amazing is the ability to just drop in a file and get exactly what you want at the end of the day. And for the right person, this just might be the best option when it comes to resin printers.